All right, welcome back. So since we just covered object-oriented programming and inheritance, I thought it would be fun to kind of dive into that a little bit more and start building like a D&D app in Python here. So the first thing that I want to cover is that there's four pillars of object-oriented programming. Those are inheritance, abstraction, polymorphism, and encapsulation. And we've seen several of these already. Basically, inheritance is the one that we've gone into depth over, a little bit of depth, which is where you can inherit a parent class with a child class, like a child class can inherit from a parent class and use those behaviors, attributes, methods, etc. Abstractions where you basically are just showing the relevant data to a user. Polymorphism is where you can do something like kind of like the len method, where you can put strings, ints, floats, whatever, and get some kind of a response. And then encapsulation is just something where you would do like a class and then it would restrict outside classes from being able to manipulate that. Or so it prevents accidental modification. So something it has to do with scope, which we'll dive into, and we'll cover all of these much more in depth, and we'll build out this app as we go along so we have some kind of a program and you guys can see how this stuff gets implemented. So first I just want to cover inheritance mostly, and to do that I thought a little D&D app would be good. So to do that we're going to import a library here called random, which comes with Python out of the box, so you don't have to download anything or do anything like that. So our first class, even though normally we should name the parent something that makes a lot of sense, we're going to name this one character dice. And the reason we're going to do this is because we want all of our player characters to have access to dice. So inside of this class, we're going to build two functions. The first one will be a roll function to roll a dice, and it will take in a number, and it will come up with a number that's a random number between 0 and that number. So it will return that. If you want to try to build these first, I'll try to explain what each thing should do, and then you can try to build them on your own. So we'll say this first method should take num as arg and return random value 0 to arg. So you can pause the video and try to build that on your own if you want. Otherwise, just work along with me. So we'll just call this roll, and it will take in num as we said, and then it will return, and random here has a method called randint for random integer. It always assumes that you're passing in 0, so if you just pass in like a number 6 here, it goes from 0 to 6. You can also pass in explicit arguments, and you can take in 3 arguments. So you can do 0, 6 here to get the same result, and you could do a step of 2, which we covered before, so you have like your 2, 4, 6, stuff like that. But for our use, we're going to hard code in the 0, and then we're going to use this num here, and we will default num to 0. And we're going to go ahead and just print that and see if it's working. So character dice, remember classes are capitalized, and then we're going to roll, and we'll just pass in 20 here, and we'll see what happens. So remember, this default number should only take place if you're not passing anything in. We'll open up our terminal here, we'll do pi dnd.py. You see we got 5. And if you're ever curious, like, is my number actually coming through, or is this just coming up with a random thing, you can print here and check your input. So if we save that and run, we see that the 20 is properly applying in there as input. If we leave it blank, it is a 0. Obviously the random between 0 and 0 is 0. So that's an easy way to check, just to make sure that you're getting the proper input or output that you're looking for. And then if you're building on your own, the next method or function that we want is a skill check. So in D&D, skill checks are between 0 and 20, and they're also plus your modifier. So we want to do something very similar to roll, but we're going to return the random number from 0 to 20 plus the modifier. So if you want to code that on your own, go ahead and pause now and do that. Otherwise, follow along. We'll just name this one skill check, and skill check will just take in a modifier value, which we will set to 0, and then we will make a die, and you could actually return all this in one line, but we'll do this so that it's easier to read. Rand int, and we will do between 0 and 20 for our 20-sided die. If there's ever any reason to change this, you can always modify it as needed. And then we'll just return die plus modifier. And these parentheses here are not necessary for this specific function. I just like to put them in to be very explicit about what I'm doing, just like in a math equation, right? So if we save here, and then we do print character dice dot skill check, and we'll just pass in 7 as our modifier. Save, we print, we get 12 and 19. If we're curious again if we're getting that, remember we can just print modifier and see if it's coming out, and you see that we're getting that 7 input inside of this function, so we are passing that in properly. Go ahead and comment that out, and we see that these are running. So now we're going to move on to inheriting this dice into our player character. So we'll go ahead and make our class. We'll call it player character, capitalized. Player character will have character dice here. And then remember that we start off with that init function. So we'll do def double underscore init double underscore. And then here we're going to pass in all kinds of values. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter here. The first one will be self, and then we will separate them with commas. We will do name, we will do race, we will do size, alignment, armor class, we will do hit points, and then we will just do our stats here. So we have strength, constitution, dexterity, not with 2 X's, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And feel free to pause if you need. And then I want to set all of these equal to a none value. So we'll just type equals none other than self. So everything other than self we want equal to none. So once you do that, you can just come in, copy paste. Right, and we're just setting the default value in case somebody doesn't enter anything. It doesn't break our whole program. And now you notice these are all arguments, so you could do them in line just like we have them anywhere else, right? So like up here, how we have this roll function, we have num in line or we have modifier in line. We're just passing in a ton of arguments to this init function. So we're getting this error because this is still a function, so we want the colon there. And then remember to indent properly, and we have to assign these. So we're going to assign each one of these. I would recommend just maybe copy pasting all of these down here, but eventually you'll need the self.name equals name and all of that for every single one. So I'm going to go ahead and pause, fill all that out. You can do the same. Okay, so I filled out all of those now. So now we're able to make our first print out of our blueprint here. And it's important to note, like I put commas in all the time in Python because I come from JavaScript and Python doesn't require it in the self.name. But up here, you see how it entered the charisma and it messed up. So make sure you have them up here in the argument area. You still want comma separated values up there. Down here where you're declaring them and assigning them, it's not important or necessary that they're separated by commas. And if you do something like that, it might be included or mess it up, but I don't think it will have any effect. So now we can take our person and we can make a print from our blueprint here. So we will call our character test guy, and that'll be the name of the variable that we're assigning this to. And we'll pass in player character, our child class, and then we have all of these things to pass in. So we have everything but self here. So we have to pass all these in. So I'm just going to copy and paste them. I'm going to hit enter and then do this just for simplicity's sake. Then I'm going to go ahead and build this character. And so I'm going to pause again, enter all of this. You can do the same if you want, or just watch either way. But Alright, so I filled out the stats that I want to make into test guy, my object test guy. Make sure if you're passing in strings that you have them in quotes, or you will get an error. So if we delete this quote here, you see it immediately detects it, because Python's good at that and VS Code's good at that. So now we have test guy down here. We'll save and just make sure, we still see that these functions are working. So I want to show you something. So if we take print and we pass test guy in here, right, we have access to all of test guy's stuff, like we have access to test guy.name. So we'll comment these out really quick just so we can see those easier. If I could click. Save, execute. You see that we get back test guy, which is this string here with the capital G. So we have access to test guy.name. We could do test guy.strength. Any of the object qualities, because none of these are sunken into a list or anything, which we kind of covered a little bit in detail. But if you had a list of stats, like if you put like stats and then you put strength, con, and all that stuff inside of a list, name stats, you would have to do like dot stats dot whatever, or dot stats 0, like index, however you want to get it. We went over lists before, so any of those methods would work. But what I really wanted to touch on is to make sure that you understand this part. So we're inheriting from the character dice class. So it might be intuitive to think that we could just pass in this test guy here and call the method roll that we called before up here in the exact same syntax that we did for the character dice up here. And maybe you'd think that we could even do this skill check 7. We'll even copy paste it. So you might think these should run. And when you run, you'll see that this takes from 0 to 1 positional arguments, but 2 were given, and that might be really confusing, and you might be wondering why. And just remember that we're just making a copy from this blueprint, whereas this is calling the blueprint itself. So right here, we're actually accessing this method from the blueprint itself. This one isn't sure where it's supposed to search for that. So what we have to pass in here in our constructor is, as these arguments for roll, our first argument needs to be self. And we need to do that for skill check as well. Self. And we can go ahead and save there. And now that we've saved it, if we come back down here and run it, you see that we get 4 and 13. And just remember, self doesn't have to be called self. We could do it as like an S here, and it's still going to work. I recommend just sticking with self so that all of your syntax is common and readable for you and anyone else that needs to read your code. So we're just going to wrap it up there. If you want to mess around, add more methods, or see what else you can inherit, maybe make an NPC class, anything else, that's fine. We will build this app out a little bit more as we go, but I just wanted to show you kind of what we can do with inheritance. So thanks for tuning in. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment if you have any questions or suggestions, and thank you.